And Terry he just listened. He was like, hey, I think you're a great communicator. You can go speak at churches. You could go speak at schools. You can go speak at the corporate world. But do you want to be just okay at all of them? Or do you want to be really great at one of them?
Yeah. Hey friends, Grant Baldwin here. Welcome back to the Speaker Lab podcast. Today, chatting with my buddy Jason Raitz, and excited for today's conversation. He teaches a lot on the topic of communication. So we're going to get into the content and kind of the nuts and bolts of what he teaches, because it's obviously super relevant for speakers. We're also going to talk about his journey, kind of the evolution that he has taken. It's kind of outside looking in. Jason, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like, you figure some stuff out and then maybe that didn't work for a second, and then figure some stuff out and didn't work. And that is incredibly common for speakers everywhere. So we'll dig into that as well. So Jason, welcome to the show. Glad you're here.
Boy, goodness, Grant, thank you. I long time listener, have listened to many episodes, some of them repeated. So I'm very appreciative of all that you do to pour into this podcast, because many walks where I've been trying to figure something out, I listen to the next episode and there it is. And so very grateful.
Thanks, man. We appreciate the kind words. I think we've been doing this for, I think it's 9 years, one episode a week. And you do that long enough and you come up with a couple hundred episodes out there and a couple hundred hours of content. And some episodes are better than others, but nonetheless, you keep showing up. So first of all, why don't you start by giving us a little bit of context, kind of zoom out. What's the big picture of your business, what it is that you speak about, and who is it that you're speaking to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started a company called Speak with People. About 15 years ago, I was listening to someone speak and I thought, wow, they're really speaking at me like this. I'm like trying to brace myself. And then the next day I heard somebody and I'm like, wow, they're really speaking with me. And so that started to just, I started to figure it out. And then I thought I came up with the phrase, speak with people, not at them. Turns out Vin Scully, if you're a baseball fan, first said it in the 60s. And I know many people have said it, but I fell in love with communication when I was 11 years old. My parents took me to a rock concert, lived in downtown Detroit. We're at the Fox Theater in Detroit. I think it was Bob Seger, and we're on the top row.
Yeah.
I know my parents were pretty edgy. And I remember standing on the chair and the whole crowd going crazy. Now, part of that was probably many of the substances that were floating around the room. But at the very end, Bob Seger stood up to the microphone and he started to talk, and the whole place went quiet.
Wow.
And I can remember at 11 going, okay, there's something here.
Yeah.
And the next morning I went to my basement and I built a stage. And then I would go and bribe my friends, with my mom's chocolate chip cookies to come hear me speak. So I'd be doing like comedy routines. I'd be doing gospel messages. I'd be doing sales pitches.
Just anything and everything.
So I've loved it. So I've just been on this journey. And of course, over time, you get on enough stages and then you want to help other people. And so I've always loved the journey of how do we as communicators, how are we as clear as possible? How do we captivate an audience? How do we cause them to lean in? Because I can get up and I can make lots of people laugh. I'm a storyteller. I love that. But I want to be a transformationalist. I want people to be, get done listening and go, oh, wow. I can change my life. I can change this part. So after 26 years of pastoring, started a business called Speak with People. And after 26 years of raising funds through a nonprofit, I kind of approached the first year the same way. And so year one, we weren't really great in the profit category because I was still approaching it like a nonprofit. Listened to many episodes of this podcast and gentleman down the road from you probably, Business Made Simple and Donald Miller and many of those type of things. So now I find myself, which is really interesting, primarily about 80% of my business is in the financial industry. So I am in rooms with financial advisors, licensed bankers, wholesalers, market specialists, and I'm teaching client communication skills. So my whole shtick is okay client communication just doesn't cut it anymore in 2025. We have so many generations working together. We want to rush right to the product, but we have to learn how to do these people-first communication skills. So that's what I teach. And so I do that with keynotes. I do that with breakouts at conferences and workshops. And so in the last 2.5 years of Speak with People, I have been able, Grant, this is wild because I was on the phone with you in October of 23 going, I don't quite know if this is going to work. And I was at a Hancock Whitney gig in Alabama, but I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. And you asked me like 3 incredibly clarifying questions. I got done speaking, went home, went to work on those clarifying questions. And the thing that you really pushed me to, and this podcast does, was just to keep niching down. And I didn't want to. I used to speak in the church, so I wanted to speak in the church. I used to speak in public schools and do assemblies, and I wanted to keep doing that.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to speak corporate, and you're like, oh. And so I cursed you and I put down the phone, came home, kind of retweaked things. And now in 2.5 years, I've spoke for Truist Wealth, PNC, Fifth Third Bank, Huntington, Regions, Fifth Third. I just did a bunch of work for Flagstar. So it's mind blowing. So that kind of gives you a little bit of our journey.
Yeah.
We're also on the flip end providing lots of content. So we have a podcast, Speak with People podcast. We want to help leaders become exceptional communicators.
Yeah.
And so whether exceptional in one-on-one with their team or their clients, from a stage or from a screen. So that's what we do.
Now, what's the difference between Speak with People and Jason Raitz? Do you view them as 2 separate things, or are they kind of one and the same and it just depends who you're talking to? How do those kind of blend together?
Yeah. It's a tough question because we're still trying to
TBD.
figure that out.
Stay tuned.
We're really still trying to figure it out because we kind of have 2 brands going. And so I've really put, 80% of it into Speak with People because the dream is in 5 years, we have, a team of certified Speak with People trainers that we're sending out to Fifth Third and we're sending out using our content. Mm-hmm. So right now, internally, I have 2 people who help me with some sales emails and sales calls and stuff. So I have one that just primarily sends stuff to service-based or client-focused industries, insurance agents, financial advisors, realtors, things like that. Because the Speak with People training, we teach all of those skills. And so a lot of times we'll teach those skills, but for those conferences, we'll say, hey, Jason's a national speaker. You can check him out on his website. So we kind of right now have been using jasonraitz.com as hey, he's been doing this since 98. He's, got things figured out. And we've been trying to build then the brand of Speak with People. So it's bigger than just me, but trying to figure it out.
It could all change tomorrow. By the time this episode comes out, it could be something totally different. That's okay. None of us know what we're doing, as we've established.
It did. I started thinking, because I had spent so much time in the church world and I had spoke at, 150 camps around the nation over the years, that I would primarily do speaking in the church world. But for listeners, I read a lot of comments. I talk to a lot of people who are like, I want to go preach in churches. Mm-hmm. The tough part is, unless you're John Mark Comer, your Ryan Leake somehow has made the jump to both. Pastors kind of go with who they know. They have a set of people they trust to do their pulpit, or they go with the Bob Goffs, the John Acuffs, the people who've kind of transcended who their congregation would know. So it's a tough one. But the church world just didn't kind of open up. And one day I was sitting with someone, I thought he wanted public speaking coaching, and he just said, hey, I'm a wholesaler. I had no idea what that was.
Yeah.
He works for an annuity company. I didn't really know what annuity was. And he said, I work with banks, and Regions Bank has me on a call every month. Would you develop a training for 30 minutes to help them with their clients? And I'm like, yeah, I love this. He left, and I'm like, I have no idea. So I put it together, and then that turned into, most of the Regions banks in Tennessee, Florida, a couple other states we did virtual trainings for. I've done a bunch of events for Regions. So yeah, we're just figuring it out, like you said, as we go.
Yeah, for sure. Now you kind of alluded to there that like today in its current form, like you are speaking full-time and doing some training full-time, but prior to, it sounds like the majority of your professional career was in the church world. So were you a full-time pastor?
Yes. Yep. 26 years, full-time pastor, youth pastor, small groups pastor. Then I planted a church. And so I led a church for 10 years. And then handed it off. And a couple stints in there, I tried to go full-time. So to early 2000s, I tried to just go full-time speaker, Christian world. Mm-hmm. And at that time, we had 3 kids. One of them was born with a rare genetic disease, and it kind of threw our lives off. And I wasn't, at the time, able to deal with the entrepreneurial stress of prospecting, but I needed the every other week paycheck. And then again, I started a nonprofit in the early, I don't know, sometime in the 2000s, where I did public schools for about 10 years. And so that was kind of full-time, part-time as I went. A lot of the churches I worked at, because we had a bigger family, multiple kids, we have multiple kids with this rare disease, gets really costly. And so my speaking really was so my wife could stay home.
Yeah.
And we have diets and we have all this, blood tests and all this kind of stuff. So for years I was on youth tours, summer camps, winter retreats, and then made the switch to public schools. And so started doing bullying assemblies. And then that led to teacher trainings and parent trainings. And so it's kind of been, back and forth for a lot of years. And so right now, 100% full-time, we're working on each gig.
But it sounds like for years you're doing like full-time traditional ministry in the pastoral sense in the church world, but then also doing a lot of outside speaking, whether that was in the church world or doing school assemblies. And so, what kept you from going all in on the speaking at that time? Because it sounds like you were doing a fair amount.
Yeah. Yeah, most years I was making, 25 to 45 just part-time on the side.
Yeah.
Doing those camps and retreats. There's a staple of camps in the Midwest that I would do all the time. What held me? That's a really good question. I remember when your book came out and I was flying to some camp to speak at, and I'm like, okay, this is the time. Like, this is the time. And
that was also peak COVID, which was not a great time in the speaking industry. So that's a factor.
It was awesome. I can remember driving to some camps and listening, to your podcast. I sound like a fanboy. Sorry, I apologize.
You're good, man.
Nonstop, because I was trying to get like, okay, can I do this? I can, especially those of your listeners who want to just go be a youth speaker in the Christian world, you're looking at a much different revenue stream. I did my last summer camp last summer, 48 years old, 1,200 kids in Dallas. I loved it. Feel like I went out in 1 week of summer camp. I make now in an hour, doing a workshop for Fifth Third Bank. I mean, I love the ministry side. I love being with the students. I love seeing the life change. But I also, like you say often, I love to keep the lights on and feed my family, and I have to do those. So when I can do free ones, but what held me back was just I didn't feel the final release. To go pursue it full time. So it was kind of part-time things. And then we moved down to Florida to work at a church, and I ended up being the 5th executive pastor in 5 years. 4 were fired. I quit, and I was like, I think it's time. I think the church door is shut, and we went full bore. And I mean, the jump for me to go from, I've always spoken to students, and then I pastored a church, so I learned how to speak to adults. But it's been night and day going to a corporate room. Last year I did a Truist Elite Performer Summit in Orlando. 300 of their top earners, people earning 800 to, 3 million. I mean, talk about being out of my league. I can walk into a room, tell a story, about my best friend's mom who vacuumed their bird, and the whole place laughs. Now you walk into a room of, these top earners who are like, okay, I need value and I need it now.
Yeah.
There was like some grace in the church world, and then especially in the student assembly world, I could get away with more stories. Yeah. I've had to adjust my speaking to now where I'm walking into the room going, okay, how am I lending value immediately to these professionals? And it's been great. It took me a bunch of reps, but you get into a groove and you learn how to make that adjustment one more time. Because it's a totally different world. Going from prospecting the schools to now prospecting. I mean, a lot of the same elements, that you guys teach in the Speaker Lab, yes. But how I'm pitching things, the financial world that I'm in is so different. Making sure that the content is actually what the audience needs. All of those things have been just mind-blowing for me.
Can you talk us through like what the evolution was been like for you in that you were in ministry full time and doing a lot of speaking in the church world and then doing some speaking in the school world, but it sounds like still a significant part of your professional career was in the church world. Yes. And so then to step outside of that and to do something non-church related, like you mentioned, you did your last camp last summer. Did you go through any like mental gymnastics or hurdles on anything that I can speak to, for my own self? Like I went to Bible college, was a youth pastor for a little while, and then when I got into speaking, I did a little bit in the church world, but not a lot. And so I found that difficult at times. And people who are not in, the church world, then maybe like, what are you even talking about right now? But I'm curious for you. You're nodding along. You seem to like, this seems that something's resonating
Yes.
or clicking. Like, walk us through what that experience and transition has been like for you.
I'll tell you that first assembly, I just kept telling myself, don't close in prayer. No,
Yeah.
don't close in
Yeah.
prayer.
I'm going to get kicked out.
Yeah, because you've done the camps and retreats. There's a
Sure.
cadence to all four talks, and then you go step in front of 1,000 kids. I did an assembly last year in Peoria, Illinois, and right before I started, a seventh grade boy put both of his legs behind his head, and like 5 rows of kids just lost it. Like,
Yeah.
how could they not? I mean, and I'm not.
I was pleasantly, it was impressive. Yeah. It
Yeah,
was
I was
nice.
just like, I am okay. The principal looks at me and he's like, "Good luck." I was like, "Thank
I've
you."
had it.
Yeah. So for me, that adjustment, my ministry years, my heart was always for. I'll get kind of churchy here for a second, but for people who didn't belong already, who didn't know, for people who were kind of already on the outside. So I was kind of already wired in the way that I spoke to them. So making the adjustment from church to school, for me, talking to kids at church camp or talking to kids at a public school, the only difference was a good amount of the church kids at camp knew to get quiet when
Yeah.
the pastor came up. The assembly, it was like, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you, and you had to grab them right away. You had to be ready to pull them in. So for me, the final straw of going from church world, and I still preach at a few churches here and there, but I just have a new revelation now. Even as a pastor for so many years, I thought I knew my church, but now being the business leader sitting in the seat, my whole world is different than it used to be. And,
Yeah.
and so now it's just opened up, much, much different doors. When I finally made the transition to corporate, what the really tough thing was mentally was just the identity crisis,
Yeah.
because for years you're just, this is what I do. This is what I do. And I felt like I need to continue to morph and change my communication and my leadership so I could continue to build something. I want to grow a company like you have. I want, a team at some point. I love being Jason Raitz, the speaker, but I would love to raise up other speakers. So for me, the path to do that has been through, let's build a company. And I've had to learn how to go do it. And the really tough thing, if anybody's listening and they're like, I've been thinking about, when I first started speaking with people, multiple people from different consulting companies approached me and said, what are you going to do for content? And I'm like, well, I'm kind of used to content. I've written thousands of messages. It's just kind of what I do. But content is a whole different world in the corporate space.
Yeah.
And so, I get in there and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? One, I had to learn how financial advisors, how bankers eat, think. I had to learn my audience. So I did 100 interviews with people from across the nation to gather lots of stuff. I interviewed people. I went and met with people. I tried to get into that. And so when I first got into speaking with people from Giant Worldwide, great consulting company, were like, hey, you need to buy into this. And I was like, ooh, that would be amazing because all the content's there, the dashboard, the test, the assessment. But there was just this, and maybe it was a crazy desire to develop our own curriculum, because at the heart of who we are, I don't think it's enough for a leader to be an effective communicator. And people are like, what do you mean? We're supposed to be effective. I know a lot of unhealthy, forceful, manipulative communicators who are effective. They'll do whatever they need to get the message down. They'll scream, they'll force it. And I had been in a couple of work environments where I was just around that. And I thought, I want to teach people how to be a healthy communicator, to be able to speak from a place of health on the inside. Because if your inner world is chaos, what comes out of your mouth is not going to be great. And that's why, like, when I do public speaking coaching, people are shocked I start with the inner world. I'm like, let's get this straight first. So when you stand up in front of 1,000 kids or 1,000 people or 20 people, what comes out is going to be healthy. So I decided not to go with buying into someone else's content, which could have been amazing, taken away so much heartache. I added a lot of road bumps because I had to learn the industry. I went from, you share your slides, like the morning of, to with fiduciary events, even though I don't have any fiduciary information, I have to submit things a month ahead of time because they have to be approved by legal and they have to be approved. It's a whole
It's a different beast.
world.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. So for me, that has been kind of the toughest adjustment. And once I was like, okay, I moved on. This is the room that I play in now. That was when the final nail was like, okay, I'm comfortable now, because there's a difference from a confident speaker on stage and a not so confident speaker. And you command the room from a humble place when you know what your audience, their pain point is, their problem, and when you are bringing solutions that can actually provide transformation. So for me, I went about it a little bit of the hard way, but had to figure out a bunch on our own. And it kind of worked. Last year, a Fortune 500 company, Athene, that I had been doing some work for, approached us and actually purchased our content. They co-branded it with us, which I had never done. I didn't know how to, I had sold things to different ministry companies that I had written before, but I had never negotiated, that size deal with a company and all the different layers, that involved. So that's a long answer to how we kind of made the jump.
I want to go back also. You had mentioned that you had done speaking in the church world, speaking in the school world, and then started doing a little bit of speaking in the corporate world. And one of the things, like you kind of referenced a conversation we'd had a couple of years ago of going, it's hard to just do all of these things, right? And that's the default for speakers in general is like, we want to spread the net as far and wide as possible. And so who do I speak to? I speak to humans. And what do I speak about? I speak about anything and everything, just because we just want to speak, and we're just looking for an at-bat for a rep. And so how did you make that mental shift of going like, even though I have experience in all these different areas and on all these different topics, and these are all things I could legitimately speak on and do a good job, how did you start to figure out like, okay, I'm just going to focus on this? Like walk us through how that happened.
Yeah. I mean, really at the end of the day, it was pain. It was pain because, when we started the business, I had a financial investor. He's still a partner. And, when that money runs out, you have to be doing so many bookings.
Yeah.
And when things aren't being booked, when and every speaker, I've coached a million of them. They just want the phone to ring. I just wanted the phone to ring.
Yeah.
I wanted to be that magical, unicorn that's like, okay, yes, I'll come speak after John Acuff at the Global Leadership Summit. Like that's, we don't see the years and years and years of stuff that John Acuff has done to get to that point, which great episode, the recent one. So for me, it was like, okay, I got to this pain point. So when I called you in October 23, it was at a pretty rough, like, okay, do I start sending out resumes?
Yeah.
Do I start, like, what do I do? And so had your phone call where you kind of pushed me, you got to niche down, find out where you're at and, go all in with it. And then I went to this conference called The Thing with another leader who actually lives in your area, Terry Weaver. And Terry just listened. He was like, hey, I think you're a great communicator. You can go speak at churches. You could go speak at schools. You can go speak at the corporate world. But do you want to be just okay at all of them? Or do you want to be really great at one of them?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And for me, I've always kind of had a chip on my shoulder because especially being a pastor for many years, I felt underpaid. Church world, you don't go into it for the money. I understand that sometimes pastors get a bad rap. It's a very small percentage of pastors who are wearing the $1,000 shoes, very small percentage. And so, my journey in life is different from, I have friends now who their 20s and 30s were their giant earning years because they didn't have kids yet. They were in the corporate world. They got these things called bonuses.
Yeah.
They got these things called incentives. I didn't get any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so when we planted our church, we took our entire 403 and put it into the church because we're like, this is what we're called to do. We're going to do it. And so for me, it was a pain point. It was like, okay, I better change or I'm not going to be able to take care of my family. And my wife and I have 5 kids, 3 with this special rare disease called PKU. And I was like, I got to figure this out really, really quick. So that's when between your call in October 23, going to this event in 24, I was like, all right, And then the doors, my friend Dan, who got me into this Fortune 500 company, he just keeps saying, the market will dictate where you need to go. And for whatever reason, the doors kept opening for me. Last week I'm on a Zoom call with the CEO of a giant financial company. They have 15,000 financial advisors. And I'd met the CEO at a keynote that I was doing in the fall. And I just took my shot. I was like, I've got this new program called Speak with Your Client, Not at Them. And I want to pitch it to her. And I'm like, like she even needs to respond to my email, but she did. And here I am, doing, basically the most important pitch of my life, trying to get into this company. And it's just crazy getting to that pain point and then finally doing something about it and really, really focusing. I coached a leader the other day, a pastor who just left his church. He's going full time as a speaker. And he's like, oh yeah, I want to speak to Christian business leaders. I want to speak to business leaders about this. And I'm like, hey, you've got 7 topics.
Yeah.
Just do one really, really well.
Yeah. When you go back 18 months or so, and again, like you're speaking a decent amount, it sounds like. It wasn't like I had 0 and I'm trying to get 1. Like, no, it sounds like you're doing something there. Like you mentioned, you were earning 25 to 50, give or take. And so it may not have been enough to go full time on, but there's at least enough there that like, okay, I bet if I put some more energy, effort into this, the results might be, similar. And so I could see myself doing this. But you also mentioned that like you felt super discouraged, super frustrated. How close were you to giving up, to quitting?
Yeah, it was real close. It was real close. Probably why I didn't in the long run, because I've had church job offers. I've had a couple other job offers, to go, do a corporate thing. My 20-year-old son does all of our graphics, edits. We're 200 plus episodes in our podcast. We have a weekly blog that has thousands of views. We have a bunch of courses that we've done. Probably if it wasn't for his involvement and how much he believes in our business, I probably would have given up because, as you get older. And if you take a big giant leap and it doesn't quite work and you get a little bit more in the hole, it is easy to get very, very discouraged. And, I was fighting imposter syndrome. I was fighting, do I belong in these rooms? And then you get online and I'm like, what the heck? They're speaking somewhere. Oh my gosh, they're, and I'm like, okay, why is this not opening up more for me? And I've had to learn a bunch of things. I am not a very forceful communicator in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had to learn how to be more persuasive with my asks when I do my prospecting calls, when I'm at events. Now I'm like, okay, I've got to leave here with at least, 3 to 5 leads for the next event, for upsells. Like I've had to learn all of that because as a pastor, it was a much different world. I can call people to their next spiritual step or, those kind of things. So I was very close to quitting, but if it wasn't for him, it wasn't for my family, it wasn't for my partner who was like, we believe in this thing, I would have threw in the towel, but here we are. We're going to keep going and, keep trying to figure it out. So
another thing I want to touch on that you alluded to is that the majority of the speaking that you're doing right now is kind of in the financial services industry, and everything that you shared so far, it wasn't like I was a financial advisor, I was a stockbroker, I worked at this brokerage. I didn't hear anything that says like, oh, this guy has a lot of experience in the financial services world. So
yeah.
It sounds like you were introed by maybe a mutual friend into that space, and that kind of opened up the door there. And then you kind of went in the deep rabbit hole of like, okay, I got to learn what the heck they're even talking about here. Can you talk us through that and maybe the imposter syndrome that you felt, and ultimately you've decided to double down on an industry that, again, as of maybe a year, 18 months ago, 24 months ago, you knew nothing about, is my sense here. And so kind of talk us through that and kind of, again, maybe the mental, the mental ups and downs that you've dealt with of going like, what am I even doing here?
Yeah. 2010, I left a church in Chicago, Illinois. It was a giant church at the time called Willow Creek. And I was on staff there. Their pastor was this kind of worldwide known person. And I was leaving because crazy story. we had a house fire while we were in Chicago, and we were actually renting the house from the pastor's son. And so the pastor was so well known that it was on the papers the next day of the Chicago Tribune and all that kind of stuff. And so we had just gotten so tired from it was a giant place, and our family was back in Michigan. This was Illinois. So I started to apply to Edward Jones. And I was walking down the process in 2010 of becoming an advisor for Edward Jones because I'm like, I love people. I've felt the sting of what money, not enough money can do. And so this would be a great. And so I started to learn the industry. I took some of the tests, but then a door opened up for me in Michigan and, never went that way. So fast forward all these years, I sit down with this friend who that's the first thing when I coach people and they're like, I want to be a speaker. I'm like, make a list of who you know, because probably one of those people, they're going to refer you and it's going to be a jackpot. 99 may say no, but that one glorious yes, And so this one we weren't even that great of friends. He had heard me speak somewhere at some event, and he's just like, and really what it was, he heard one of my podcast episodes where we talked about all the differences in communication between the different generations. And how the first time we have, 4 generations, sometimes 5 generations working together, and everybody communicates differently. And he's like, that's what our banks need, the financial centers. And so so he just said, can you put together 25 minutes to help them learn how to communicate that way? And so, I'd never forget that first virtual. I turn on my own lights and it's, Microsoft Teams, and it starts popping up all of the different, offices. And I'm like, oh shoot, there's 78, bankers, financial advisors, wholesalers. I have, they're like, hey, we have a communication expert, Jason Raitz. And I'm like, I've been communicating a long time, so I guess I'm an expert. But that's really, you mentioned imposter syndrome. That was kind of the first one, because when I started meeting people, and I'd say, yeah, I speak with people, we do corporate training, we're a communications company. And they're like, oh, you must have a master's degree in communication. You must have a
fill in the blank.
MBA dropout. I started an MBA, wasn't able to finish it. And I was like, oh, so imposter syndrome, number 1. But then 2, probably 600, 700 stages over the years. I've been on paid speaking gigs, whether it's, $13 or, $5,000 or $8,000, whatever it is. And so that's kind of given me okay, I can walk into a room, and that helps supersede it. But the more that I just got those reps, and I was like, okay, and the more research I did, I've always struggled with just thinking, thinking in general. I'm not going to wow you in the intelligence category. I scored my age on the ACT. There's a reason why I got great grades in band. Music came, but English and, all this math didn't. So I've always had to my talks, I've always had to cut half of them out because I'm always trying to, and especially for years being a pastor, you're not deep enough. You've got to, so I've always kind of heard those voices. So I had to make sure, okay, my content, could really help. So what I had to do to make the transition finally was say, okay, I got to get on the phone with people in the industry and say, how can I help you? What do you need the most? Listen to managers. I listened to people day to day, and I went, this is what I've been doing all these years, because I've had thousands of cups of coffee with people, and I've listened to their problems, and I've, counseled them, and I've helped them. That's all client communication is. Yeah. And so I've now developed a framework for financial advisors, insurance agents, client-focused leaders to, serve their clients through their communication skills. And the gist of what we do is we say, hey, all of us, for whatever reason, we put up these self-made barriers. We don't even see it sometimes, but we start to create this wall. And when I do my talk, I actually have these boxes and I start to create a wall because, old pastor habits die hard, you gotta use visuals. And I'll do this in corporate settings, and I've got the wall and so I have these 10 unhealthy behaviors. And then I have them walk through an assessment where they acknowledge which ones they have. We tear down the wall, and then we say, okay, let's get to the yes the quickest we can. Yes to the new account. Yes to the, the referral. Yes. And so we walk through a couple of those healthy behaviors And it's just every day. How do we carry ourselves as a leader? How do we share our presence? How do we use active and adaptive listening? So for me, it was really just a deep dive into the industry, and I fell in love. I've always loved connecting. I've always loved the one-on-one. Let's sit down. Let me hear your story. So now to teach financial advisors that it's just mind-boggling. I'm in Queens last year at a Flagstar Bank, and we're at the upper level, and everything's crammed and packed, and we're in Queens, and so people are like a little bit more forceful, in the South. And so this guy Peter comes up to me. He goes, "We're at the hour break, 3-hour long workshop." He goes, "I don't want to be here." And I'm like, "Peter, as a speaker, I could tell from your body language, that's not a." I'm changing his name, obviously, but he goes, "You said something though. Through our research, we've been able to find out that financial advisors could actually lose up to $80,000 to $100,000 a year through ineffective communication." Average financial advisor communicates with their clients once every 3 to 4 months. That gives them a 22% favorable rating. If they do it once a month, it gives them a 77% rating. So these kind of things, I don't know why I geek out over it, but I'm like, it's just every day, it's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's the Dale Carnegie, it's the Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. It's all the Maxwell stuff. I just geek out over it. And so Peter says to me, "You started talking about listening skills, and my wife's been telling me for 30 years that I don't listen." And I'm like, whatever. But then when we tied it to a potential financial loss, he got real interested.
Yeah.
And the rest of the time, he's taking notes. And so for me, once I just plowed through, because you got to plow through. There's that season where you're like, what am I doing? I don't understand. I want to give up. Am I going to get another gig? If you plow through, and I listened to the episode recently with you and Eric, and you just talked about those 4 pillars. It's mind-boggling, because if you just do those consistently, doors start opening. Last fall, I think I had, just in the fall, it was, 30 speaking engagements, 50 some flights. And I'm like, okay, this is amazing. It's just doing those things.
I want to wrap up with this. Let's go back again, maybe 18 months or so. And again, you were on the verge of quitting, and what that feels like. And having listened to, a lot of episodes here, there's a lot of people listening who are in that same spot, maybe who listened to whether this is the first episode or the 100th episode that they've listened to, and are going like, dang, I want to do this. I think I can do this. I don't know. And I'm just, one day you feel like, yeah, okay, all right, we're good. It's okay. We're fine. And then the next day you're like, well, oh, well, I guess we'll let that dream die. And so talk to that one speaker who's listening right now, who is on the verge of giving up, but their message matters. What would you say to them?
Oh, I would just implore you not to give up. I mean, if you've done the work, if you're doing the steps, like if you're in the speaker lab or you're doing some other program and you're following the steps, your audience, the solution is viable, do everything you can. Do everything you can. Wake up every single morning and remind yourself. Use the power of, that's why I love this message of Speak with People so much, because I'm like, our words create things. There's a reason why use words to create everything, right? Like, we can create things. So create this life that you want every single day. I had to start doing that. I never really knew, like the Tony Robbins manifestation stuff. I was like, I don't know if and now I find myself every morning. I'm like, this is the stage I'm going to be at. I have a list of 175 conferences that I want to speak at, and I have some of those that I just walk through and I go, okay, we're going to get to this place where this happens and this happens and this happens. And so, if you're wanting to quit, call me. I would love to get on the phone with you. But if you have a coach in your life, if you have somebody, and if you don't, double down. Get somebody who knows what they're doing, because they'll save you so many roadblocks. They'll save you so much time and so much pain. I went through so much pain I didn't need to. I could have gotten a professional and just save me from that. So don't give up. You got this.
Very good. Jason, this has been super, super helpful. If we want to find out more about you, follow you online, where can we go? Also, you got a book coming out this fall. Tell us about the book, and also, again, where can we follow you?
Yeah, everything's at speakwithpeople.com, speakwithpeople.com. Find all the information on our programs, our coaching, our podcast, our blog. We have a weekly communication guide. We have a free course to help elevate your one-on-one communication. And so all that's on the website. You can also find me on all the socials, Jason, Raitz. YouTube and all of that good kind of stuff. Yes, my book will be out September 1st. Speak with people, not at them. If you are looking at how you can increase your influence in this world, real influence isn't demanded. It's earned one meaningful conversation at a time. So this book, we walk you through how to have those meaningful conversations so you earn influence with people and grow your leadership. So I absolutely can't wait. Grant, this has been absolutely phenomenal. Have followed you for a long time from afar. Really appreciate everything you do to help so many leaders. So thank you.
Thanks for the kind words, Jason. We appreciate you taking the time. This has been fun.